reading. I'm getting an echo. Oh no, it's me. I guess I'll just turn it on for the audio. Okay, okay, very good. So I'm going to be talking about sanitation to save lives, and this is a subject that has been greatly fascinating to me, and I read things like the Journal of Hospital Infection Control for fun, because that's just the kind of nerd that I am. And I know that some of this will seem a little esoteric, like you're not going to be in the position of making these kinds of decisions. But I think the shelter context is a really valuable context to talk about sanitation because it really highlights the risks and rewards of sanitation in ways that might be masked in a private practice setting because you don't see as many animals that are vulnerable to infectious disease, and you don't see as many animals that are actually spreading and shedding infectious disease. So you won't get caught as soon in a private practice environment if your sanitation program is inadequate, but you will get caught eventually. And one of the project that I did as a resident in shelter medicine was to investigate an outbreak of vaccine-resistant virulent systemic feline calicivirus. And it spread in a couple of high-end veterinary practices in Los Angeles. And it affected healthy, adult, well-vaccinated cats, and it killed about half the cats it infected. And it's an unenveloped virus. It's fairly hard to kill. And so it brought to light enormous gaps in the infectious disease control program in those high-end practices that had been masked by the fact that mostly their clients were healthy and weren't at big risk for infectious disease. And we also saw that when canine influenza first hit. A lot of practices just didn't have the standards in place to withstand the assault of an infectious disease against which vaccination didn't protect. And the other reason why it's important to understand sanitation, even if you're not thinking about working full-time in a shelter and having input into disinfection practices in a shelter, is because more and more you're going to see in a nice community like Madison some chihuahuas that a friend of mine shipped here from Fresno, California, and they are not going to be fully vaccinated. We are going to see more infectious disease. That's mostly a positive thing, that we're getting animals from risky situations and we're getting them into homes and we're making them safe. But in the process, we need to know how to build a barrier between those animals and other animals that might be vulnerable. So we know the best things that can happen with sanitation, that we can, prevent disease and make the shelter a pleasant, attractive, nice-smelling place for the public to visit. We can protect public health. We can use our resources wisely, not waste chemicals, not waste water. But there's a real downside to sanitation, and that's something also to be aware of. And the more you're working in a shelter and it's hectic and there's multiple people involved in the process, the more risks there are for things to go wrong. So you could waste time, you could waste money, and you could waste chemicals with a process that just doesn't work. And so you might as well have spent all that time and money doing something else that would have been more helpful to get animals adopted. You could actually spread disease. The cleaning process is when you're handling the animals and their waste most closely. And so if you become contaminated during that time, or if the animals are mixed together during that time when otherwise they're singly housed away from each other, then the cleaning process can be the time that disease spreads efficiently through a shelter environment or through a clinic. And, sort of worst case scenario, cause direct toxicity with cleaning chemicals to animals and workers and the environment. So we don't want to mess this up. So this is the to-do list. You want to choose the right products, and you want to think about matching the products with the environment and with the pathogens you're trying to kill, just as when you're choosing an antibiotic. You think about the spectrum of effect, and you think about, does it have penetration into the environment where that bacteria is living? So you want to think about, does this have penetration into the environment where we're applying it? Is it going to work? Just with an antibiotic, you think, can the owner give it frequently enough for it to work? With a disinfectant, we can think about, are we going to have long enough contact time for it to work? So we want to understand our disinfectants in the same kind of detail that we understand our antibiotics, which is another product that we use to kill pathogens in different environments. And then, even if you've got a great product, if you don't have the right process for applying it, it's either going to be ineffective or it's going to be harmful. So you want to choose the right process. You want to choose the right places. And then you want to make sure that it happens exactly the way that you imagine that it would. So first of all, let's talk products. Some of you probably know this. Here's a product that's called Pink Fresh, and it says there kills all known germs, which would be awesome. There's not really one like that, so you want to think about what's the activity of the product. And there's two different activities that we look at. There's detergent activity, which is the cleaning activity. Does it physically lift dirt? Does it cut through grease and help to mechanically wash it away? And does it actually kill germs? Some do one, some do the other, and some do both. Although the ones that do both generally are not as good of cleaners as cleaners that have just only that job in life. Want to think about the spectrum of effect? Have you guys encountered the concept of unenveloped viruses? So some of you have. All of you? Does anyone not know what an unenveloped virus is? Okay, a few. So most viruses have a fatty envelope. It's made of lipid coating them, and they can't survive without it. And the nice thing about a lipid envelope is it's pretty easy to disrupt. You know, if you just look at it harshly or you subject it to desiccation or heat, you can kill off a virus that's relying on its lipid envelope. But some viruses have learned to get by without that. And what's a notable unenveloped virus that we worry about in a shelter environment? Parvo. And what's the feline equivalent? Panleukopenia. And I just mentioned calicivirus. So those are really the big three, but there are a few other unenveloped viruses that we have to worry about. And since they don't have that handy envelope, they're harder to kill than the others. And then ringworm is the other thing that's hard to kill in a shelter environment that we often are concerned about. And there's other things like roundworm eggs and things that have spores, but not quite as common of a concern. As I mentioned, we want to think about contact time. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Activity in the face of organic matter. So that's something that's really variable. Do you guys know of a product, a disinfectant product that's commonly used that has very poor activity in the face of organic matter? Those of you who have worked in shelters? Bleach. Yes, you're all over it. So some products are way better. So the thing about bleach you can't necessarily assume about other products. You want to think about penetration into porous surfaces. So disinfectants that are sudsy and bubbly tend to get into porous surfaces and into cracks better, into like wood that might be contaminated. So that's something to be aware of if you're in a shelter that's old and it has unsealed concrete, or a group cat room that's in a refurbished barn stall. You want to think about something that's going to not just get onto that would be great on a stainless steel cage, but it's not going to be effective in that environment. And then you have to think about the ease of application. In a shelter, if it's a great product and it's cheap and it's effective, but they can't figure out how to use it, then it's going to be a useless product, right? So sometimes you have to use a product that's less perfect because it's easier to apply. It has a simple, no-brainer system to apply and comes with all the wands and brushes and dilutions sort of pre-configured, and that product that's less ideal, applied exactly right, will still be better than your more theoretically ideal product. You want to think about potential toxicity, and then ultimately you do have to consider cost, but also consider the cost of using something that doesn't work. That's a really high cost. So, quiz time. Which of these aren't reliable against parvoviruses and their friends? Someone want to take a guess? Just name one. Somebody, raise your hand and name one that you think doesn't work. Chlorhexidine, I heard that. Yes, good. Anyone want to venture a guess on another one? Sorry? Yes, ding. That's 2 out of 3 dings, I think. So you got two. And the other one, which you might not be as familiar with the name quaternary ammonium, but some of the trade names are Rocal, 222, Parvostop. Probably the most commonly used class of disinfectants in veterinary clinics and shelters, although that's starting to change with newer, better products being available. And one of the most common questions that we get at sheltermedicine.com is, will this disinfectant kill parvo? Because they have a billion different names. If it has onium in its chemical name or the prefix quat, then it's a quaternary ammonium compound. And they're good, sort of workhorse cleaner disinfectant. They have some detergent activity. They have moderate activity in the face of organic matter. They have good efficacy against Giardia. That can be handy. They're really flexible. You can apply them all different ways with central systems, with hose end systems at different dilutions. They're pretty cost effective, but, and it's a big but. Back in 1980, researchers at Cornell were doing work with feline calicivirus, and they were using a quaternary ammonium compound to clean. And the calicivirus kept spreading from the cats that were supposed to have it to the cats that weren't supposed to have it. And so they said, wait a minute, you know, this disinfectant is labeled against calicivirus, it's labeled against unenveloped viruses, but it doesn't seem like it's working. So they tested it, and sure enough, it didn't work. And so all the manufacturers reformulated, relabeled them effective against unenveloped viruses. And then in 1995, the newer quaternary ammonium compounds were tested and found ineffective against unenveloped viruses. Reformulated, relabeled, 2002, same story. Reformulated, relabeled, 2009, same story. How many rounds do you want to go with this? So that was a stunning realization to me when I first ran across the 1980 article and thought about all the hours I have spent as an animal control officer and kennel attendant in a shelter, earnestly spraying Parvosol onto kennels in the hopes of protecting our animals. So sometimes when you're working, you know, when you're choosing a disinfectant, you need to look to the scientific literature. You need to look to peer-reviewed studies. You need to look to your professors. You need to look elsewhere besides just what the manufacturer tells you, because there's ways that they can be tested where it can seem like it's effective, you know, if you combine it with desiccation or you put a super high concentration, but then in the field, it doesn't work. So which ones of these have no cleaning properties? Not a cleaner. Bleach. Bleach is a big one. Anyone else? Any other one that you can think of that's not a cleaner? Good. Bleach, and this is Bleach's friends. Bleach-related compounds and alcohol. So you rub alcohol on your hands. It kills what it kills. It doesn't take anything off your hands, and we just learned that alcohol doesn't kill unenveloped viruses. So alcohol hand sanitizer can be a great tool, but if you're worried about parvo or panleuk or ringworm, you just created a nice, sticky, moist surface for all those germs to cling to and help you spread them from one animal to another. So I'm just going to talk about a little specifics of bleach because it is an awesome chemical. It's a great disinfectant. It's really powerful. And what else makes it awesome in a shelter? It's super cheap. Yep. And it's also flexible in its application systems. And bleach, you know, can be used in a hose end applicator. You can get high concentration bleach that can be used through a central system. There's calcium hypochlorite, which is Wissy Wash, which comes in capsules. There's sodium dichloroisocyanurate, which I spent a year learning how to say that quickly, which comes in the roaming Fromer system, which is one of those nice sort of prepackaged systems that comes with a cleaner and the disinfectant. So lots of strengths to it, but it has to be applied to a pre-cleaned surface, so it's never a one-step product. So if someone calls and says, oh, well, we cleaned with bleach, Well, no, you didn't. You applied bleach, and it got inactivated. So if time is of the essence, then sometimes a one-step product that can both clean and disinfect can end up being cheaper because employee time is costly as well. And so that can end up being more cost-effective than one of the bleach products. And I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there's a lot of rumors that run around about how long is something stable after it's been mixed. And I'm just going to ask you about bleach, because maybe you don't know about the others. How long is bleach good after it's mixed? How many say 24 hours? How many say 7 days? How many say a month? How many say 3 months? So bleach in a light-proof container is stable for a month. Good news, right? It has to be a light-proof container, though. Like, that makes all the difference, so that's important to know. Yeah. If it's in a light-proof spray bottle, this is the study that was done, it can be stable for up to a month. Yeah, but it's easy to get them, light-proof. And if you're thinking about, so trifectin is another fairly commonly used chemical. It also inactivates parvovirus, and I'll get to you in just 1 second. It's stable for 7 days, so it needs to be remixed every 7 days. Accelerated hydrogen peroxide is a relatively new chemical. I think it's in use at the local shelter now. It's also reliable against the parvoviruses, and it's stable for 3 months. So if you're thinking about, well, what do we want to put on the truck of an animal control officer to spray down their kennels if they happen to pick up a sickly looking puppy or to spray their equipment with out in the field? Which one would you choose? Yeah, because they're not going to be running through a whole bottle of it every 7 days. And so it's just going to sit in their truck, and it's going to end up inactivated. And they're going to be spraying, essentially, water. So when you're thinking about, or what's going to sit on the exam surface at the clinic, you're going to want something that's stable, or you're going to want to have a routine where every 7 days, like on Sundays, you remix the trifecta. Or on the first of the month, you remix the bleach. Yeah. Few days. Yeah. Yes, they are. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So there's really no earthly reason to put bleach in a container that allows light to enter in. Like, containers are very, very cheap. Just don't, if you have bleach, don't have any containers that anyone could put bleach into that are transparent. Which one is perfect in every way? Well, it's sort of a trick question. But accelerated hydrogen peroxide comes pretty close. So for the unenveloped viruses, bleach and bleach family, potassium peroxymonosulfate, which is trifectant, or accelerated hydrogen peroxide are reliable there. Ringworm, we really don't have a great disinfectant, and so it just needs to be mechanically removed and then verified. We're looking at accelerated hydrogen peroxide, but right now the thing we know is bleach at 1 to 10. That's the only time, by the way, that bleach should be used at 1 to 10. Normally it's used at 1/2 cup per gallon, and more is not better. It doesn't kill the parvo any deader. It just irritates the animals and workers' respiratory tracts. Organic matter, peroxygen with surfactant. I need to change this slide. Potassium peroxymonosulfate, accelerated hydrogen peroxide, or a high-quality quaternary ammonium compound. That's the more expensive ones in general. Quick turnaround time, accelerated hydrogen peroxide, potassium peroxymonosulfate. Pre-packaged systems, Brooklyn, Wishy-Wash, accelerated hydrogen peroxide, and some quats. So you notice accelerated hydrogen peroxide is in every category, one way or another. So it is a flexible product that can be used in a lot of different ways, that's reliable against the unenveloped viruses. and has a quick action. It doesn't require as long of contact time as some of the other products, and good penetration into surfaces. And it is a one-step cleaner or disinfectant, so it can be a time saver. We've recently gone over to it at the teaching hospital at UC Davis, so I think it's going to be a product that we're going to see more and more of, but it does have some limitations. So, still there's times when you need mechanical cleaning. Still there's times when it's just not going to be cost effective, so you need to be aware of the other choices. Lots of things you'll hear about, surprisingly common question that comes up is, does detergent inactivate bleach? No, it doesn't. Bleach plus detergent, fine combination. If there's a whole bunch of organic matter, the organic matter that you were hoping to clean off with the detergent will inactivate the bleach. So normally we prefer a two-step process where you clean with a detergent, then you apply the bleach. But for instance, bleach in laundry with detergent and hot water, good combination. Works, helps the activity of the hot water and the laundry. Speaking of hot water, in general, hot water increases the activity of disinfectants and lowers the required contact time. So it does not inactivate disinfectants, which is another rumor that you'll hear. And it's something to be aware of, if you're cleaning outdoor runs in Wisconsin in the winter, you're going to want to err on the long side of contact time if you can't use hot water to clean with. So be aware of the effect of cold temperature as well. Yeah. You would want to rinse just to get the organic matter gone. And in general, if you're doing a two-step process, the time you would maybe use a quat and then follow with bleach would be if you normally use a quat and then all of a sudden you're concerned about parvo. And so now you're going to follow it with bleach. Then I would go ahead and rinse. If you're going to do a two-step process with bleach, I would use a detergent in general first. Quaternary ammonium is more expensive. It's more toxic and is not as good a cleaner as detergent, and it doesn't have any different spectrum of effect than bleach other than Giardia. So if you're not worried about Giardia, I would just use a detergent cleaner and then rinse and then bleach. Yeah. That's a good question. Hard water can have effects on disinfectant activity. In my experience, it hasn't played out that like shelters have needed to adapt their bleach concentration to account for hard water. More how that plays out is the hard water destroys the application equipment. But it is a consideration if there's extraordinarily hard water. And what you want to do is really look at, you can get test strips for the different chemicals that are available as disinfectants and look at what the functional concentration is in it as mixed. Quaternary ammonium is, in essence, it acts as a detergent. That's how it disinfects, and that's why it's not great against unenveloped viruses, because the detergent activity disrupts lipid layers that surround viruses and bacteria. And if you mix it with the detergent, they can actually inactivate each other. So you don't want to mix quat with a detergent. Bleach with a detergent is fine. Quat and bleach is fine. Quaternary ammonium and bleach is fine. Ammonia and bleach is a deadly gas. So don't get those mixed up. Just in general, shouldn't be ammonia in shelters where there's bleach, just because people do crazy things. And either potassium peroxymonosulfate or accelerated hydrogen peroxide and bleach create a really noxious, will make you feel sick, fumes, and it'll inactivate the potassium peroxymonosulfate. So again, if you're using trifecta or accelerated hydrogen peroxide, probably the best thing to do is to just not have bleach readily around for people to get creative with. If there's bleach on the premises, store it elsewhere from the main area where disinfectants are mixed. So now let's talk process a little bit. So I said, disinfectant time is a risky time. And it can be the time when actually disease spreads. And we've seen this when we're investigating outbreaks in a veterinary clinic. This isn't the veterinary clinic in question. This is an animal shelter. But here is a sickly-looking hound puppy demonstrating the technique of pooping out pools of bloody diarrhea. while the dogs are all in a pen during cleaning time because they were in single runs where there wasn't another place to put them. The other place to put them would have been in the hallway, tied out across from runs, potentially going nose to nose, potentially creating a tripping hazard or a safety hazard for people who are cleaning and passing through the shelter during that same time. Here are cats stacked, all kittywampus, during cleaning time, just stressing them out of their little gourds so that the experience of cleaning may be enough to cause illness in some of them. And here is a shelter that cunningly was not designed with doors on the back half of the runs. And so the only way to clean the back half was to crawl through this little guillotine door and hose the other side. And so dogs were in the run while it was being hosed. They were being sprayed with chemicals. So, you know, again, very stressful for the dogs, potentially safety hazard for the people. So thinking about the cleaning process, really important for, you know, sometimes we say, you know what, cleaning here is doing more harm than good. Just spot clean. You know, if your only choice is to spray the dogs with chemicals, then just don't use chemicals while there's dogs in the run. Get them out of the run when the run is empty. Use the chemicals. Otherwise, just pick up the poop. It's not ideal, but do that while you get a new shelter. So speaking of doing harm, these are some photographs of a cat that had disinfectant toxicity. Which of these do you think has most often been associated with this kind of toxicity? How many say phenol, Lysol type products? How many say bleach? Kitty lick bleach. How many say quats? Trifectant. Undecided. These are the voters that make polling hell. Quats. Yes. Yes. The back row scores. So a number of different studies, and not only local effects, but quaternary ammonium compounds can have systemic effects. And this is a picture from a shelter we visited recently. There's supposed to be a little nubbin in there that dilutes the quat when it's sprayed onto the runs. And the nubbin had just fallen out. And so we've had these called into us as virulent systemic feline colesiate virus outbreaks. Went into the shelter at 8 cats who were like prone, had fevers of 108. Some had pneumonia, severe respiratory, ocular, nasal discharge, severe oral, palatal, esophageal ulceration. And come to find out, somebody lost the lid of the disinfectant spray bottle, so they were just sort of sloshing it on the kennels, you know. Or another time, this actually happened at our teaching hospital. They had the disinfectant bottle in a little metal box on the wall, and then there was some holes in the metal box where pipes were coming out. And a little kitten stuck its skinny arm in the hole, knocked over the disinfectant bottle, leaked out and dripped down the wall, got on the kitten's fur. The kitten licked himself, and then developed severe signs of toxicity. And that's the bad kitten. He jumped back up there to show us how he did it. Dogs. Yes. So, and in fact, that other mixer problem, that was also a dog problem. And they can have the same horseshoe-shaped ulcers on the tongue. So it can present looking like systemic disease. I think that's one important thing to realize. The good news is remove the source. If you know that an animal has just ingested quat, then dilute with milk or water, bathe the animal, get rid of the disinfectant, clean the environment, you know, rinse the environment. Broad spectrum antibiotics because their whole esophagus is just trashed, and pain control, and they can be better in just a few days. So really important to differentiate these things from a more severe outbreak, but you know, ideally prevented if at all possible. Yeah. No, it's erosion. It's like deep ulceration. And not actually, I think, as far as I can tell from the literature that I've read, known what the mechanism is for the systemic effects. But it's not just sort of secondary to the severe local ulcerations. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a good question. I don't know that there are recommendations for that, but if it's irritating to you, it is irritating to the animals. And it's very important that the cage be dry, you know, or darn close. And so often in the process of like going down a line of runs and then drying everything, there is the opportunity for the disinfectant to dissipate. But it is one of the reasons why we like to use spot cleaning when the animal is in residence, whenever that's possible, because especially when it's like a box cage and there's not awesome ventilation, really it can be like you stick your head in there and you're like, ugh. You can feel your bronchi closing up, and so you can only imagine what the cat feels. So I think it's more like gauge it by your own experience of it, and do what you need to do. Also, you know, in terms of using fans and stuff to try and ventilate the area as best possible, especially during the actual cleaning time. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the question was, is there a waiting period before you put an animal back to allow the disinfectant fumes to dissipate? Yeah. Wow. The question is, anecdotally, do cats go crazy for bleach? And I know when I first started working in shelters, we didn't have accelerated hydrogen peroxide. We didn't have trifectant. Bleach was the thing that killed parvo, and I loved the smell of bleach because it was the smell of cleanliness. But I thought I was the only one, so I need to meet your cat. Has anyone else had that experience? Really? Well, and look at him. Bart cat. I don't know. I think you should get a grant to study that. This is a favorite picture. Light porous container. Labeled as bleach. I don't know if you can see that. Alcohol, and it's a quat. I can't emphasize enough. If there's a problem and you think it might be disinfectant related, witness every step of the disinfectant preparation, storage, handling, application, rinsing process from start to finish. So important to make sure that things are correctly mixed, labeled, and handled. We've seen toxicity, tragedies, or infectious disease outbreaks that were traced to the fact that somebody lost the measuring cup that we used to use to measure the disinfectant. So tie it to the wall if you need to, but just make sure that all the equipment that's needed is always there easily for staff to do this correctly. Because they're not trying to slack off, but they're in a hurry. You know, often there's high turnover staff in those positions, so they're not always aware of the dire consequences of doing things wrong. And so you can often go into a shelter and hear people say, well, I just kind of eyeball it, or I just wait till it smells, until it burns my nostrils, and then I do it. Label the product with the product, the expiration dates, and ideally the initials of the person mixing, so that if there is a problem, you can hunt down the person and provide them with kind, constructive feedback. Have you guys had a housing lecture? Are you going to have a housing lecture? All right. You're going to hear a lot more about double compartment housing than I'm just going to say briefly. For cleaning, it's an incredibly important and useful invention. It's also really important for animal welfare and for staff safety. But way better to just put all the animals on one side of a double compartment cage, do the cleaning, disinfecting, drying, whatever you need to do, let the cages air out, and then move all the animals back into the environment when it's dry and pleasant for them. Limits the chemical exposure of the animals, saves a lot of time. You don't have to put the animal somewhere and then clean the somewhere where you put the animal. And it avoids, you don't have to track in and out of dog kennels while you're cleaning. You can actually clean from, sort of back out and clean and disinfect behind you. This is the kind of thing that fascinates me. The microbial numbers transferred by hands went from 68,000 to 140 just with drying. With a 10-second on a cloth towel and 20 seconds on an air towel. So moisture really helps both survival of bacteria and viruses and transfer from one surface to another. So, if you wash something and then you don't dry it, if you dip something into a bath, a foot bath, and you don't dry it, if you're at the airport and you're in a hurry and you wash your hands and then you don't take the time to really dry them, and then you pick your nose, you just really increase the opportunity for you to infect yourself. So if you don't have time to dry, sometimes it's better not to wet. And this is a picture from a shelter. The picture on the right, I'll do it with my little mouse thing, because I think it's not on your right, is the quaternary ammonium disinfectant dispenser for a central system at a shelter in Louisiana that had an outbreak of pneumonia, Pseudomonas pneumonia, that we traced to dogs. It actually got in through their footbeds and then spread systemically and caused pneumonia. And we cultured it from this little tube. And the kennels were never getting dry because it was Louisiana, it was really moist. And so it was being applied with the disinfectant, and then it was just surviving. And this is a irregular surface in a concrete run. This was at a veterinary clinic that was having an outbreak of severe canine respiratory disease that had caused some dogs to have to be hospitalized. And we were able to culture pathogenic bacteria out of that puddle, even though it was a freshly cleaned run and a little puddle of quaternary ammonium disinfectant left there. So just smoothing and sealing those surfaces so that it was more dryable was a really important part of stopping that outbreak and preventing future outbreaks. And, shelters in the Southeast have resorted to towels during, especially during outbreaks, during times of particular concern, or even having at it with a leaf blower is something that I've heard of being done. During normal times when the dogs are healthy and it's not a big deal and the surface is fairly smooth, then just squeegeeing it and good ventilation. And if it's dry, fully dry within a half hour or hour, that's okay. You don't have to go crazy. But if there's a problem, then look to drying as well as looking to disinfection for part of why that might be. How many of you are going to be at the talk tonight? We'll see if you really need to go. What is the single most important source of shelter cat upper respiratory disease? Who wants to blurt it out? The herpes person is getting close. The other cat's person is getting farther. What's the single most important source of shelter cat herpes? Stress. It's the herpes they walk in the door with. They already have it. And stress turns it on. And what's one of the most stressful things a cat can experience in a shelter? Cleaning. It smells weird. It sounds weird. They have to come out of their cage maybe for the whole experience. It's just a big freak out. So cleaning cats less can really help cats. Let's see if this works. This rat was modeling for me sort of like what a cat does when it's in a cage in a shelter. Can't really hear the song, can you? Oh, that's too bad. Well, I've got the microphone. Right. I think that's hopeless. Um, but just, think about what a cat does in a shelter cage. It hangs out maybe in its litter box, so it's got some, whatever was in its feces and in its litter is on its fur. They lick themselves, so whatever's in their saliva is in their fur. And then when you pick them up, they clench their piloerector muscles. That's a stress response in cats. And they deposit their hair onto your clothes. And then repeat 50 times with 50 different cats in a perfect way. If they didn't already have herpes from the experience of having their kennel cleaned, you'll spread whatever is in the feces and whatever is in the respiratory secretions to every cat in the building. So if a cat is going to remain in its cage, really, this is something that I learned. This is something that I got in a big fight with the staff at Dane County when I was a shelter veterinarian there. I was like, more is more. Clean the hell out of every cat every day. Spray every wall with disinfectant. Take the cat out, put it in a carrier, then put it back in, then clean the carrier. And then, guess what? That same cat with all its germs is right back there. And in another 5 seconds, all the germs that were on the cat that you just removed are right back. So it doesn't help to clean the whole cage and disinfect the whole cage every day if the cat is just going to stay where it is. You only need to do what you need to do to make the cage environment look attractive to the public and be good smelling and sort of a pleasant environment for the cat. So you're going to clean the litter box, you're going to replace that. You can clean stuff off of the walls if that's there. You don't even need to use a chemical and disinfectant, and in fact you shouldn't, because that's going to lower the amount of chemical exposure that the cats are subjected to. So that's a quick video of it. We have detailed instructions on our website if you're working with a group that you're trying to convert over to spot cleaning, and it's one of our favorite recommendations that saves tons of time and really can dramatically decrease upper respiratory infection in shelter cats. So it's definitely win-win. And then you take the time that you save there by not cleaning every cage like crazy every day and clean in some other areas where it matters more. It's fine to do this for cats with upper respiratory infection because, again, they're just going to reapply all their same germs. And either their immune system is going to overcome it, or the drugs you're giving them are going to overcome it, or it's not. It's not going to be the fact that you clean it off the wall of their cage when it's still inside their body that's going to make the difference. We're still thinking about ringworm, right, Sandra? Okay, so stay tuned on ringworm. We used to say ringworm you got to clean every day. Now we're questioning, really, do you have to do that, or is that counterproductive? Yay. But for other, when it's not ringworm, then for sure, really beneficial. And this is actually was studies were done in mice that found mice got less respiratory disease when they kept their same nesting material versus when it was changed on a daily basis. And for dogs and cats too. If they're not poop or pee on it, then just leave it. These spikes here, this was a noise monitor that we left in a cat area. These spikes were cleaning time. Can be very disruptive, especially just the opening and closing of metal on metal cage doors. So be conscious of that during cleaning. Be conscious of music playing loudly during cleaning. Encourage use of earphones for staff. Replace the litter pans calmly if it's metal on a metal litter pan. And cats are very sensitive to a negative association of smell or sound with developing a food aversion. So you want to be careful about, oftentimes cleaning and feeding goes on at the same time. But if a cat is even subjected to a puff of air while it's experiencing a new food, it can develop a food aversion just from that. And so you can imagine, in one cage you just laid down the food bowl, in the next cage you're spraying your chemical and it gets a whiff of that. and it's a novel food because it's in a shelter or a vet clinic, all of a sudden it hates that food. And it's set down a track now to maybe getting sick and, ultimately maybe not getting adopted if it's at a shelter. So feed either first, before you do your cleaning, or after things have settled down after cleaning. We can do spot cleaning for dogs as well. But because we have to track in and out of runs to clean for dogs, and you could track some germs into the run, if you have to track into the run, then for dogs that have been vaccinated less than 5 days, you want to do full cleaning on a daily basis. But other than that, spot cleaning can work well for dogs. If you can get, what you don't want is dried urine there, so you want to clean up the urine if you need to, but you don't have to use a chemical to clean the urine, just like you don't bleach down your house every day, because you may not pee on the floor every day. And if you have double-sided runs, oftentimes the dogs will really focus their pooping and peeing activity on one side of the run. And so oftentimes you can get away with just spot cleaning the side of the run that's got the dog's bed and food, and then you might have to use at least water and detergent to clean the other side of the run where the urine and feces is. I'm going to zip past this because I'm running out of time, but I did want to talk about a few more things. I've already given you a hint on this. Standard that you'll hear is disinfectants need 10 minutes of contact time. But in reality, it depends on a lot of factors. So for instance, if you drop 10 degrees centigrade, you increase the exposure time that you need for bleach by twofold. So that's why I told you that, if you're having to clean in a cold environment, then you need to increase the contact time from what's on the label. If you don't have a lot of time, then there are products now, accelerated hydrogen peroxide and trifectant, are labeled at between 30 seconds and 2 minutes of contact time. So if you think about what's sitting on your exam surface, or you're doing a vaccine clinic, and the reason they're there is because they might be at risk for parvo, and you're not having 10 minutes for that card table that you're vaccinating on to have adequate contact time for something that requires 10 minutes, then you want to have something sitting there that is going to have some effect in 30 seconds. And that's going to mean accelerated hydrogen peroxide or trifectant. This is another common thing, is like you got to close the exam room or close the kennel for 3 days after exposure. Parvo can live for 2 years. So if you don't clean it and kill it, closing it for 3 days or 2 weeks is going to do nothing. So what you want to do when you have exposure to a durable, serious pathogen, you want to clean thoroughly with an effective disinfectant from top to bottom. And I like to just repeat 3 times to give you 3 chances. But if you want to do that 3 times on the same day, that's fine. And then you can reopen that room or that kennel for use. I'm going to have to skip this video, but I can show it to you later if you want. I talked about sort of laying up on cleaning like crazy when the animal is in the cage and focusing your energies on surfaces that really matter. And I was a shelter veterinarian. We were having an outbreak of parvo, and I finally asked the question, hey, how are they cleaning the animal control vehicles? And the answer I got was, they aren't. So before I ever had a chance to vaccinate, before there was ever a health check performed, they were riding around in a vehicle for several hours that was never cleaned and disinfected. And so it was a no-win situation. All our efforts at the shelter, all our accelerated hydrogen peroxide meant nothing because they were exposed before we had a chance to evaluate them at all. So you really want to focus, when you're working with a shelter, focus on getting those critical surfaces clean. And those are the surfaces that have high contact and that contact the animals early in their shelter stay when you know the least about their health. Exam surfaces, intake rooms, the cage they're put into when they first arrive, that should be freshly cleaned, disinfected, and dried. And then as they've stayed for 24 hours, you know their health, 3 to 5 days, they're vaccinated, you can start to relax. And since I only have a tiny bit of time, I'm going to end with this, and this is sort of moving towards the relaxation phase. A lot of shelters have this notion that you better just like lock down the animals and don't let the public touch them. And we wondered about that because we know that people like to touch animals. And that is one of the ways that, and we saw it in ourselves, like we're experts, and still, we go into a shelter and we poke into a cage with this hand, then we poke with this hand, then we poke with this side of our pen, and then we poke with that side of our pen, and then we sanitize our hands and we start over. So we had a vet student. You know, she didn't work in a shelter, so she was kind of clean, and she went and she touched 3 cats in a row and like really petted them, and then we checked her hand for organic matter. And then, sorry, I didn't realize. We also went to a staff member at that same shelter who was diligently wearing gloves and changing them between every cat, but she'd look at the cages behind her, small single unit stainless steel cages. She had to take the cat out to clean, and so she was putting it against her scrub top. And so we took the organic matter sampling off the same size surface area from her scrub top. And this is what we found. 67,000 units of organic matter contamination on the hand, 2.4 million units of organic matter contamination on the scrub top. So, if a cat gets petted by 35 people and it gets her out of the shelter 1 day sooner and saves her 1 scrub top contact, she comes out ahead. Let people pet the kitties. Yeah. Oh, we didn't do a before test, so we just did the surfaces that were contaminated. Yeah. That's why, ideally, you spot clean, because that's the time you're really seriously gross. And then you want to change your scrub top after you're all done cleaning. Or before you do intake, before you interact with juvenile animals. Throw on a protective top. Change after you've done euthanasia or after you've treated sick animals, or have a lab coat you throw over yourself. So it's not realistic to change scrub tops between every animal, obviously, but you want to think about changing clothing between populations, especially between a high-risk population and a newly admitted, naive juvenile population. And now, sadly, I shall have to skip to the end. And I actually had a slide on that. So I'll make these slides available, and you can take a look at the details. Wow. And I think I probably said this enough, but I just want to finish up on it that, you know, the best laid plans can fall apart. So the most important thing you can do is check periodically and make sure that the process is happening the way you imagine it is at all steps, from the very first time the animal comes into the system to the moment that it leaves. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, this whole set of slides, so that the things I flew by, if you saw that fascinating, tantalizing thing about foot baths and you want to know more, it'll be there. Oh, okay. And these will be posted in the course section at sheltermedicine.com. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Hope to see you this evening.